Terry. Welcome to the Blue Abroad YouTube channel, and welcome to another episode of Carlton People. And as you would have heard in the previous episode, I was hoping to get interstate this year and interview some of my favourite Carlton people that I've met along the journey. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be, and I've got none other than Dane Rawlings on. G'day, mate.
Hey, Terry, how are you, mate? Yeah, it's bit bittersweet, isn't it? I think we probably lined this up to do before round one because we'd booked tickets to come over for the Richmond game, which I was really looking forward to. First time in probably 5 or 6 years I've been over for that game. So, and even the week before I was still coming, and then it probably all changed when Rudy Gobert tested positive, wasn't it? And the NBA got called off. And from there, it was just a domino effect, wasn't it? So, a bit disappointing, but at the same time, it is what it is. So, but, it's good to be on. Good to have a chat.
It's good, mate. It's good to get you on. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. It was all booked. It was planned. I had Riley lined up, you lined up, Rafi, 3 states coming to Melbourne. It would have been a good time, but I guess we're kind of like... It was weird timing because I guess the season had started. At least we did get a game in, but to sort of have the build-up and, footy season is such a long off-season. And so to have the build-up and then you start round one and then it's just ripped away, we're kind of got to go back into our cages.
Yeah, that's it. And, still we don't know what's coming, when it's coming, what it's going to look like, who's going to be involved. There's so many questions, but it's sort of like you just want something to come forward, don't you? Just whatever it is, let's get it going. But it's probably still, realistically 6 to 8 weeks away, whatever it may be. But just biding time at the moment. So it'd be good to know what. Obviously, everyone's on isolation and stuff like that. It'd be good to know how the boys are going. Training wise, how are they keeping in touch and all of that sort of thing. So hopefully they're all going all right and it's not affecting them too much mentally.
Hopefully not. Yeah. But we're just gonna have to wait and see the end product when we get back. We'll know pretty quickly. I think once we're back, who's staying fit and who's a little bit behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess obviously they're doing their own thing and they sort of do in the off season, don't they? I mean, they all come back. That first week of pre-season, and it's like, Jesus Christ, these boys have been working. So you'd expect they've been doing their own stuff in this sort of 6 to 8 weeks that have gone by. So can't imagine they wouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mate, again, welcome. And I like to start these episodes off with the same question. And obviously, you and I know each other very well. We've been friends for a while now, so we've had many a heated conversation, many a happy conversation. The banter's been good, but maybe shed some light on your Carlton story and where it all began and how you got to be a Carlton person.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, we're probably, you, me and Dan, we're in a private group. It's probably the R-rated Blue Abroad. So
the side of Blue Abroad that no one sees.
Yeah, that's right. So for me, well, a little bit different. Obviously, live in Perth. I did live in Melbourne in my 20s, but grew up in Perth in the 80s and 90s. So before internet, Foxtel, all of those sorts of things. So my love for Carlton sort of came from my family. My parents followed Carlton in the 70s and 80s, and that sort of grew from, obviously it was state league competitions back then. So, the Waffle, Sandful and VFL were the 3 big ones. And my mum and dad absolutely loved Ken Hunter, obviously a staple hold of Carlton during the 80s. He was a Claremont boy. They followed Claremont in the Waffle. So their love for Carlton came from following Ken Hunter. And then there was a couple others in the 80s. There was Ross Ditchburn, Warren Ralph, Wayne Blackwell. So they all played, all Claremont boys that played at Carlton. So that's where my sort of knowledge from Carlton came from. If I wanted to go see games of footy over here, I had to go see West Coast because that's all we had. The only other footage we had of Carlton was if they played on a Friday night, or they used to have an hour on Saturday afternoons of the games of the round and stuff like that. So generally, back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a Friday night game. All the other games were on a Saturday afternoon, and then you'd have like 1 or 2 Sunday games. So you'd get maybe 5 or 10 minutes of footage of Carlton. Yeah, and that was it. So unless they were coming here, which generally was once a year, so that was all we sort of got to see of Carlton. So it was, if you could listen on the radio, if they're on ABC radio or something like that, or just from learning about the club from mum and dad. So that's pretty much all we got. So any other footage.
Crazy.
Yeah, so we had to go watch the Eagles. So I saw a lot of the Eagles growing up, obviously, and they obviously a good team to go and watch because they were really successful. But Carlton, just as much, like during those times, late 80s, early 90s, like they were the shit, like they were really good. They had forwards, backs, defenders just across the board. So, and I think, as you sort of grow up, obviously there's individual players that you find, like I'm in my late 30s, so like most people sort of my age, obviously Kuda was the man. I think I'd been to most of the Carlton games in the late 80s and early 90s here, and West Coast used to smack us like every single time. And then 95 was the first time that we'd really been competitive. 93 we had a good side, but West Coast, that was between their premiership years. So 95 was the first time that Carlton had really had a dominant year. And West Coast were just tailing off the back of, they'd been in a couple of, I think, 3 grand finals. 93 they made a prelim. So they were just tailing off a bit. And there was the game, obviously, I still think it's the best game I've ever seen live. Round 21 at Subi. And it was the first time I'd seen Kuda live. And it's the first time I'd ever seen anyone like that. He's 6'3". He weighs 95 kilos. To be able to play in the midfield, put his hand into a bottom of a pack, pull it out one-handed, fend someone off and run off like a sprinter, like it was something like we'd never seen it before. Like it was just insane. So, and that's where the AFL, he was a game changer for the AFL because it's where they sort of went towards, looking at athletes, key forwards, key defenders, even midfielders, So he changed the game. He really did. And some of the things, as we've seen the footage, we can continue to see the footage. It's almost every week. Kuda had his best on ground game in 95 or 97 or whatever it was. So that's where, my real love for Carlton sort of started to nurture and grow. And obviously, it was the first time that I'd seen live Carlton beat West Coast in Perth. And, it was by a point. It was an absolute cracker of a game, just non-stop all day, backwards and forwards. And it felt like West Coast had sort of passed the mantle to Carlton, and they went on and won the premiership that year. So they never looked back. So
love that.
That's pretty much. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I look back at photos of Kuda, and he was, for me, I was born in 91, so he was the real first hero of mine. Yeah. And I look back now in 2020, I look back at photos of him playing in 95, like, for example, the 95 grand final, and you look at the body type, and it's like you've plucked someone from 2020, like one of these Bontempelli's, Cripps fights, and you've is that fair? Like, I really feel like he stands out like a modern guy back then.
Yeah, he was he was the pioneer, and that was sort of the changing. I think because obviously, back then it was just footballers, even in 95, I don't think it was probably until late 90s, early 2000s that they started to become professional footballers. They still had jobs in 95. So he was the first athlete that was converted to a footballer. And from there, it sort of grew. And now it's like we're sort of praying for Carlton to draft footballers and go away from the athletes a bit. So it's starting to turn a little bit back the other way, but yeah, he was just unbelievable. Like he could jump over players, as I said, grab balls out of packs with one hand. He could do stuff that nobody else could, and I think that's why people loved him, because he was so unique.
Yep.
No one had seen it before. It's similar to like Polly Farmer. going way back, for Geelong, he'd grab it out of the ruck, push a couple of players off and be able to handball 30 metres. Like those individuals that can do stuff that nobody else can do, that's what we all go to the footy for every week. That glimmer of hope that somebody's going to, Charlie Curnow's going to sit on someone's head or whatever it is, that's what we go to the game for, those little things.
Yep, for sure. The beauty when I talk to someone like you who's seen probably another decade or so of footy than what I have is that you can give the knowledge down to me and generations below me. And I that's why I'm really excited to understand a little bit more of. So you've seen the golden era, or you've seen the best, the mighty Carlton of the 80s and the 90s. And obviously we've gone through a 20-year period, save for 3 or 4 years we're in finals, but apart from that, it's been pretty rough. Yeah. So how have you adjusted? Because I feel like there's two types of fans almost. There's the glory years, the we are Carlton, we are the best, whatnot. And then there's, my generation and even younger who are just born into, we suck. So how have you gone balancing the expectation? And because I find that's where the division is in those two different sets of fans.
It's a fine line. Like if I'm truly honest, probably because I went through the system, in the late 90s myself, and I played senior waffle footy.
Yep.
And after a couple of years of that, I was just getting a bit burnt out because it is quite strenuous, like the training and recovery sessions, even at that level. So I moved to Melbourne for a few years, and I sort of, and that was actually at the back end of 2002. So that's after all the shit had happened. We lost draft picks, got massive fines. So I actually fell out of love with AFL as like the competition itself. So I was just focusing on playing footy with mates. So probably for, that 5 or 6 years from 2002 to 2007, I didn't keep as close an eye on it just because, it sort of left a bitter taste in my mouth. So it's only probably been in the last decade that I've rekindled my love for the game again.
What was it? What was it that brought you back?
I was probably retirement, so that less, less stuff to do. So, you love the game, but I guess I was probably focused on my career, both personally and as a footballer as well. So, when you're in your 20s, you play footy on Saturday afternoon, don't you? So you miss most of those games, and you'd rather, go out and have drinks with your mates and not so much focused on the footy as such. So you always keep a close eye, but if we were winning 5 or 6 games a year back then, that was a good year from, those mid-2000s. So, and probably coming a bit closer to home. I was really happy that we decided to go with a full rebuild at the end of 2015. Where do I sit now? This is probably the first year that I have some sort of expectation.
Since the rebuild started in 15?
From 2015. The last 4 or 5 years, obviously, I'm critical of the club, how they perform and things like that. But as long as the guys were having a crack, then that's all you can ask for. Most of them are just babies and just starting to come into their prime now. So it's actually been quite disappointing that, this season's just come to a halt, because it would have been good to see, all the stuff at the back end of last year, started to show a little bit as to whether, that expectation became reality. So it was a bit upsetting in that regard, but really looking forward to see where they go. But I think, going from, it was let's have a crack to we actually got to start putting some runs on the board now. We're in the 5th year of a rebuild. So if you go back through probably the last 2 decades, every club that's sort of gone through a full rebuild like us, year 5, 6, 7, that's when they're really starting to push for success. So so that's where I'm at now with where we're at. So
yeah, and you touched on you've been in the system, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that because where all of us, armchair critics, and not many of us have actually played at the highest level. You have. talk to me a little bit about being in the system. You said you played in the Waffle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Played senior footy for Claremont.
Wow.
Did some training with West Coast the end of the 90s, early 2000s. Didn't quite make it, but at the same time, like, it was good to sort of go, played and trained with the best, to go through sort of what they went through, doing pre-season trainings, like even, training during the week, recovery sessions on Sunday mornings. Like you say, we're all armchair critics, but like it's actually good to see, like, from the other side, like, Cripper's getting paid X amount of dollars, but like he bloody earns it. It's 7 days a week. It's not just the game day stuff. Like, you think about, like, every single Carlton forum, every time we lose, like, people are jumping on them. We've got the media, we want answers, like, what the hell is going on? Like, that would be, I reckon, twice as stressful as it would be that when they're going out on a Saturday afternoon and just kicking the footy with their mates, because, you've played footy yourself. When you're out there, you're not thinking about, shit, I'm going to cop it from the fans or the media. Like, you're so ingrained in the game of footy. Obviously, there's pressures probably build up during the week and stuff, but I guess from that side it was good to see. But I guess I have a bit of an understanding on the game. But that's going back. Like, I finished up at Claremont end of 2002, so that's 18 years ago now. So the game's changed since then. Playing local footy, it's all about win the contested fall, get the ball forward, and try and kick as many goals as you can. But AFL, it's a lot different.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's all about, keeping possession, forward momentum, and locking it in the forward line. So, but it's good to sort of see how it sort of worked. And that was when, I wasn't athletically gifted as such. Good skills, and could jump all right, but I wasn't, I couldn't run 15Ks, and that's what the game sort of was changing in the early 2000s to go towards that sort of athletically gifted sort of players. So that's probably just bad timing. Like, if it was, I had so many, and scouts as well, they probably said if you were in the draft 10 years prior, you probably would have gone, in the top 10. So
wow,
it's just just how it is, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
But,
and so when you,
sorry,
I was going to say when having the lens that you do and seeing what goes into being an AFL footballer, even though it was 18 or so years ago. So when you watch our boys now, and obviously there's that notion of they take a couple of years to really come on. Of the young kids we have now, and I'm going to take Sam Walsh out of the equation just because I feel like he's a bit of a special one. Do they look like to you? Are you seeing signs from these young ones from 2015 onwards that they're going to get there?
Yeah. I reckon our 2015 class have all shown enough to say that they're going to make it. 2016, who we have, Samo and Fisher, they have, Fisher's probably been inconsistent, but he's shown enough. 2017, I'm a little bit concerned about. Paddy, he had some good games in his first year, but we're going into his third year. Like, he probably hasn't come on as much as you thought. Like, I just look at players in his draft, and like, they're progressing and playing some good footy. Lockie O'Brien as well. And like I said, last year's draft is probably a little bit early. Walsh is an absolute freak. Like, you don't see, it's probably happened 3 times in the last 2 decades where someone comes in and kills it.
A 17/18-year-old to do what he did in the first year? Like, you've seen the system, and you're probably right in the bubble. So what's like? Is that just ridiculous?
Yeah, I reckon, going back, even like to when Cousins was a rookie, I think he in his first year, like, he couldn't even get a game in the midfield because West Coast were that good. But I think he played in a forward pocket and kicked mid-third, like 35, 36 goals in his first year. That was a really dominant year. I think Bontempelli had a pretty good first year in his first year. But other than that, For Walsh to come in and just seamlessly move straight in, and I think he was averaging 28, 29 possessions at TAC Cup, and he was averaging 25 for Carlton. So there was absolutely no lag at going from the juniors to the seniors. So, we heard from day one, like Cripper and all the boys there from the coaches saying that they haven't seen a rookie train as hard or as intense as Sam Walsh. So, any of the young kids out there, that's what they say, practice makes perfect. So it's all in the training. So the harder you work, the easier it's going to be on game day. So, so he's a freak, absolute freak.
Yeah. We've spoken about goal kicking, and we know that goal kicking has been an irk of the modern game. Can you give me your side of the coin? What is the problem? Have we gone too far with sports science, or is it just what are you seeing?
Yeah, but see, those are obviously Cooter was my favourite, but I still do. I love watching all the other teams and just especially the top four sides to see game plans, what sort of style works for them, and why they're winning. Back in the 80s and 90s, like the big key forwards, I used to love, Lockett, Carey, Dunstall, Sticks, Peter Sumich, all those guys. They'd kick Gary Ablett 80, 90, 100, 110 goals a year.
Yeah.
So you used to love that. And you'd see, like, their technique would never change from first minute of the first quarter to the 30-minute of the last quarter. Like, they just knew exactly what they're doing. But I've heard a couple of ex-footballers say, I think Brian Taylor said a couple of years ago he was employed, and you might have to correct me if I'm wrong, it might have been Richmond. He was as a forwards coach there, and he wanted to grab the key forwards to go take them and do some goal kicking practice. And he went and spoke to, it was at Collingwood. And he went, this is when Mick was at Collingwood, and he said, I want to take Cloak and a few of the other boys to do some goal kicking practice. He said, yeah, no worries, go check with the sports scientists. And as long as they say, yes, you can take them and do what you need to do. So we went and checked, and they obviously, because they all wear the heart monitors and it tracks how many times they've kicked in every session and all that sort of stuff. And they said, you can have, Clokey can have 3 shots. This bloke can have 5 shots. And he's like, he went to Mick and said, mate, I can't do my job with them having, 3, 4, 5 shots at goal. And they're like, we've got to watch out for injuries and all this sort of stuff. So, but yeah, look, as you say, we've discussed this. And for me, I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to kick a higher score to win, don't you? So, look, it's a skill that has, really come back a lot over the last couple of decades. And it's one that, should be focused on more. How much more, I don't really know. But, it's just so frustrating. And not just us, every team, take you to mark 15, 20, 25 metres out and they spray it, or it hits the post or goes out of bounds on the full. It's just so many wasted opportunities, So in general play, there's pressure on you, but set shots, there's no excuse.
Yeah.
There really is. So, yeah, I think it's a fine line, but it's a skill that they definitely need to practice more.
Yep, for sure. It would be a crime for me to have you on here and not have you share the story about Michael Jordan. I know it's a tough one for you, the 3-on-3 tournament, but obviously the Last Dance has come out. And so tell me a little bit about I know it's not footy related and not Carlton related, but I just think it's a really cool story. So I need you to talk me through it.
Yeah. So Michael Jordan, so there was a competition back in the mid to late 90s, about 96, 97. And me and some mates went. So basically there was a competition you had to win the state competition, which we had done. Yeah, there was 3-on-3 competition. So there's 3 and a sub, so 4 in the team. And you had to win the state league competition, and then every state, that team that won that competition then had to go to New South Wales to play in the Nationals. And whichever state won, so there was under 15s, under 17s, so we're in the under 15s comp. Whichever state won that competition, they got to travel to America to meet Michael Jordan. It was Gatorade 3-on-3 competition. It's 25 years ago. It's a long time. So I had a basketball scholarship as well as playing footy to the Willerton High School, which is focused on basketball. So me and three mates entered the competition, won the WA league. So we got to go over to Sydney for the national competition. In between that, there was probably 6 to 8 weeks before that competition. So it was in the middle of winter because basketball back then was, they played during winter, the main season. And went up for a mark. It was we were just playing on a Sunday afternoon for my local footy club. Went up for a grab, took a ripper and come down, and I've torn the ligaments in my ankle. Out for a month, just complete. So one of our other mates filled in and got to go over for the nationals. And the boys won it. To their credit, they actually won the competition and went over and got to meet Michael Jordan. So I missed it because I hurt my ankle playing footy. So I was absolutely devastated, but so happy. It's like, once in a lifetime thing. But I was out there doing what I love, got hurt, and missed out. So I was absolutely devastated. So there's pictures floating around on Facebook. I'll see if I can find it. I'll add it to to the comments of this video. Of my mate, meeting Michael Jordan. And the second part, which we spoke about as well, is when they actually got to meet him, because they met him for like 15 or 20 minutes, got to chat to him and all that sort of stuff. So when they met him, it was actually at UCLA College, which is, massive organisation in NCAA basketball. And it was in the off season. And the Lakers were training at the same time. So after they met Michael Jordan, they actually got to meet the Lakers, and that was the off season that Shaq had just been traded from Orlando to LA. So they got to meet Shaq, Kobe in his rookie year, Magic Johnson, Nick Van Exel, Eddie Jones, so absolute scenes. So they would have had an absolute ball. So they've got, at all their houses, they've got the picture of, framed with Michael Jordan and stuff, but they've all got, photos with Magic and Shaq and, 14, 15-year-old 6-footers up against this 7'2", 300-pound monster. It's unbelievable. But, so missed out by the skin of my teeth, but anyway.
No, it's a good story nonetheless. And it's funny because if you were living if that had happened in this day and age, I mean, the mark would have been on social media. It would have gone viral,
Absolutely. It would have been like, oh, this is the kid that missed out because he hurt his ankle. Yeah.
But here's 1.5 million views.
That's it. Crazy time.
All right, I'm going to run you through some quick fire questions before we wrap it up. I want to get you on. The idea is to get you on the spot. Favorite Carlton player at the moment in this current crop?
Harrison Mackay.
Okay. This is one I've only added in some recent videos, but which of the current young group, I mean, we'll take Walsh out. So which of the current young group do you think is going to make it that perhaps no one really is talking enough about? So someone that will look back at this video in 5 years and say, oh, wow.
Probably hasn't had enough opportunity to prove it yet because he's only going into his second year, but I love Liam Stocker. Big fan. As you know, Dan and I do a lot of research on the under-18s and who's coming through across the board. I was a big fan of Stocker in 2018. And when we traded up and actually took him, Dan will tell you I was jumping around like a little schoolgirl. I was so happy that we got him. Yeah. So he's the one for me. I reckon he could be, so Stocker.
Okay. If you could bring one current player onto the Carlton list right now, who would it be?
One current or one from
No, a current player playing in the league right now. And slot him.
Another team?
Yeah, from any team,
I reckon we need a high-pressure small forward, and this guy doesn't get. I rave about this guy. He doesn't get a lot of kudos, but he does his job every year, and that's Jamie Cripps from West Coast. Absolutely love him, and kicks 30-plus goals every year. nearly 4 tackles a game. Like, just does his job. He's the epitome of what a small forward should be. So I'd love Jamie Cripps on our list.
Yep, love that. You mentioned your favourite moment before. And I know there's been a lot of bad moments, but can you pinpoint just one of those disastrous days where it was just, this is the worst experience of my life?
God, that's a good one. I reckon West Coast beat us here in the mid-2000s by, it would have been 20 goals.
Wow.
I don't know if it was about 110, 100. It was, I don't know if you remember. It was the game where Fev actually gave away a 50 and he was in the umpire's ear and they gave away another 50. And like, so it started on half back and like, I can't remember who the Eagles player was. He actually kicked a goal because he'd given away like Fev had just absolutely lost it. It would have been 2005, 2006, but yeah, West Coast absolutely annihilated us. So that was probably the lowest point for me. Yeah.
Love it, hate it, but love it.
Yeah.
And the final one, what year will we win the flag? Which year is it going to be?
I indicatively, look, all the way through this rebuild, I've always stuck to 2022.
Yep.
This year's obviously looking a lot different. So
we'll give you some leeway. We'll give you a year leeway if you want to. Yeah.
I reckon we're going to be pushing, in finals 2022 and like that 3-4 years. So 2022 to 2025, we've really got to give it a good nudge. So somewhere in those sort of 3 years, I reckon. So yeah, I'd say in the middle, 2023.
Yep. All right. Love it. Well, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. These go so quickly.
Yeah.
It's just
crazy,
it's an easy thing to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for your time. And I'll speak to you later on anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in one of the groups. Absolutely. Cheers, mate.
All right, mate. Go Blues.